Happy Venus Day, Collective. Hope everyone had a good week. I am checking in, and first thing I want to do, share with you these gems. I don't know if you've ever seen these before, but they are commonly called sea holly. Now, the proper botanical name, I'm probably going to butcher this, but it's Eryngium, spelling Eryngium. We'll call it sea holly. But what I love about it is it's got these little cone shaped centers that are kind of these spiky bluish purple. I don't know, they're just like so magical. They're like little tiny, like those tiny pine cones that you find, and then of course the edges are, it looks sharp, but it's all very soft, and it's got this seems like some of the pieces seem a little feathery, but there's just this like blue glow to them, and I love them. Aside from being like non-traditional, they very much have, if I'm going to bring in the planets, because you know I'm going to, they very much give me like they have a very like Martian energy to them. To me, they're like, they have a movement to them somehow, and the fact that they look spiky and like sharp, very much associated with like Mars. You know, I've said knives essentially are associated with the planet Mars, Martian energy. These have a very Martian look. Um, but that what's funny is when you touch them, like they're not sharp at all. So I like them. And of course, you know, given that Mars is in Scorpio right now, water sign, um, and also one of the signs that Mars co rules, the blue, like the wateriness, it just, I don't know, it screamed out, must take home because Mars in Scorpio. So I just wanted to share these with you. I've had these before. One thing I really like about them is they have a really long, I guess shelf life isn't really the word, but they look just like this for a long time when you keep the water refreshed. So, like, unlike flowers where, you know, they're generally beyond their best after a week, these guys kind of go for a minute. And it's also really good because you can use like different vessels, like something with like a more narrow opening, just, you know, for variety, because all of the like action happens way up top, and so each thing is just like one stem, and therefore nothing gets too crowded like at the opening, which, you know, of course, for a traditional flower bouquet you can only get away with doing this for like certain types of flowers, and that's only if you like strip off all the leaves at the bottom. So these are just like a fun switch up to traditional bouquet. Definitely, like, I don't know, this would make a really fun centerpiece. Like, if you really want to, for those of you who are doing a Thanksgiving, you really just want to like switch it up, make a centerpiece that just is totally non-traditional. Like, I don't know, get really creative. Even like found objects. Like, one thing I've always thought would be really cool is taking even like some sort of clear glass vessel, maybe with like a slightly larger opening, and like gathering leaves, like fallen leaves, a bunch of different colors, and just literally putting them in this, like, you know, maybe like a wide, shallow, like clear glass bowl or something like that, and even like a few pine cones and like um pieces of lichen or something. I mean, just like go for it. And aside from it being inexpensive slash free, I don't know, it's like a conversation starter. And honestly, if you are hosting a Thanksgiving and gathering a, let's say, a mixed crowd, why not have a conversation starter that has nothing to do with anything but the look at the found objects I found in my yard? Worth considering. Think about it. I mean, I don't know. My theory is that lots of people, even with differing opinions, are secretly hoping to have something to talk about other than like the contentious things that almost like always come up when there's no other conversation starters present. So my advice, make a really cool natural object centerpiece with like, really non-traditional arrangements of cut flowers or botanicals, and like put them along your table runner and just see how many different conversations you can spark that end up surprising people about the fact that nothing contentious has come up. I don't think it's a terrible idea. But I mean, look at this. Who wouldn't want to talk about this? Just saying. We're going to put that there for now. Once again, sea holly, or Eryngium, Eryngium. Google it. See what you find. They are perennial, apparently. So I've had on my list ever since I found them last year and got some cut versions at the floral section of the grocery store. Thought to myself, I'm going to grow these one year. I mean, I still haven't, but next year. So there's that. I'm going to do my trusty carrot prep, because if it's one thing I'm going to do to survive these shorter, darker days, it's make this beef stew. And it's just as easy to make a large batch of beef stew as it is to make a small batch. So, of course, it's too late to have it for dinner tonight because you got to put it in the oven for like 2 hours. But it'll make a really nice thing for Saturday and carry me through the weekend and beyond. Especially if I get up and I'm like, oh, nice, all the prep's already done. Then I can get right to the fun vibes where I bust out the cauldron and just get in my creative vibe with the herbs and flavors. Light a nice fall candle. Maybe put on some music on the TV for the background, and really just create my own vibe, create my own peace in a time to where it seems that might quite likely be the most valuable survival skill that one can cultivate. And I don't really care who you are listening. I suspect that you can agree readily, just based on whatever stresses are going on in your life, plus just among the collective that a lot of us just tend to feel, whether we're looking to or not. And to be specific and to not make it complicated, we've got today, we'll learn a new term today. There's a term called Cazimi. If you want to look it up, it's Cazimi, Cazimi. And what that means is in the heart of the sun, okay? So why am I telling you about Cazimi? Well, today, when we say something is Cazimi, a planet is Cazimi, that means it is in the heart of the sun, which means it's exactly conjunct the sun. So today, that was Mars, the planet of Mars. And if you want to know a little bit more about the vibe of Mars and Scorpio, I have a video on that, how to channel the energy of Mars and Scorpio. But we haven't talked much about the sun. We kind of take it for granted as like the main luminary, the main life-giving luminary of our days. The main luminary signifying vitality and life force. So whenever you have something, a planet like Mars, aggression, action, masculinity, war, conflict, and you put it Cazimi with the sun, which is like associated in terms of how it reads in your chart. Your sun sign is like your ego, your sense of identity, your sense of purpose. Um, I've said vitality, your kind of drive, your self confidence, and also your inner authority. Okay. Now, when you combine those energies, um, there's a lot of danger for like ego battles, of course, conflict. But then, as I've discussed in other videos, when you look across the sky forming an opposition, you still got Uranus there. So, unlike, the sun I've talked about and Mars that will move along a little bit faster, Uranus is an outer planet. So, it's going to move a lot slower. So, since I started this channel, and every time I've mentioned Uranus, it has not like moved that much. In fact, I think it still might be moving retrograde. So that basically means it has hovered right around 20, 21 degrees of Taurus this entire time while while everything else that's closer to us, like the sun, Mars, Venus, Mercury, have all buzzed along. Now, Mars isn't very fast. A Mars transit in any given sign is going to be about 2.5 years. So, it's going to be in Scorpio um, for a minute. But, what I will say is that when you combine it with the sun and you've got that opposition to Uranus, there's like almost this sort of energy of almost this inner pull towards authenticity, right? Like you might find that this time, maybe in the context of your own life or just what's observable in the external world available to see for all of us, is a time of unmasking, for better or worse, and oftentimes, quite frankly, for the better. I mean, whatever it is that's been kept hidden and beneath the surface, kind of hiding behind like some facade. I think people are finding it harder to maintain the facade. There's like a fracturing. Have you noticed like a fracturing of it? And um, when you combine that with the energy of Saturn in Pisces, which is associated generally with like an era of disillusionment. Okay, what does disillusionment mean? It quite literally means sort of this kind of a, maybe disappointment is a good way. Disappointment at like things revealing themselves to not be what we always thought they would be. And it doesn't even mean like things have changed. It's sort of more so suggesting that like um we had an idea of how things were, almost like this sort of Neptunian, right? Pisces, a little bit of Delululemon. We had these like sort of delusions sometimes, but like ideals, like a romanticized view of things in a lot of cases. And Saturn, Papa Saturn, the great teacher, has kind of come in and like you might say pierced the veil in a lot of ways, sort of. No matter how much we want to put our head in the sand or we want to stay in our little like delusions, some of them are harmless, but others, it's I do say that sort of with like a little asterisk because there is a fine line between like, romanticizing something and seeing the good in things versus like having this sort of misplaced idea of reality based on like a childhood view of things that, to be real, it just doesn't translate into the way the world works, especially when there's like a lot of suffering. And you might find yourself having a tension within yourself because the way you saw the world isn't quite, it's not quite holding up. And even if you are like a self-proclaimed optimist and say everything is going pretty well in your life, all the things that you have put value on, you still have value, like in other words, your value system hasn't changed much and maybe it doesn't need to. But despite all of those things, you just feel a sense of disillusionment. I suspect. You might find that, you know, and some people look at it as like this, like, I don't know. I think some people, it manifests as like a nostalgia. Oh, why can't things be the way they've always been? Well, that also has its limits. I mean, let's face it, things being the way they've always been, I don't think I need to point out to you why that would be a terrible outcome for lots of groups of people. Um, but I think the the time that we're living in now, but also just the effects of these transits, whether you're a follower of the planets or not, just I guess you're just gonna have to take my word for it, is a masking. It's like mask off. Okay, if you feel sort of at your wits end, if you feel sort of like already under this pressure and like almost busting at the seams, that is your sign. That is your sign that maybe whatever it is you're trying to maintain is actually not sustainable. And maybe before you are forced to reevaluate and reprioritize things and go back to the drawing board about what is authentic about your life and what is less than authentic in terms of your value systems and how you're living, um, I would suggest, if you can, just like taking that pressure, that sort of like, I'm done pretending, I'm sort of done, that sort of I'm done attitude is good, but it's important not to associate it and like project that onto other people, like sort of, because I think that's what we do a lot when we're not in touch with like, why am I feeling this way? Like, where is this aggression coming from? Well, I'm going to tell you, it's coming from Mars and the sun sitting right there side by side in Scorpio. And then, across from Uranus, it's almost like, why do I feel like just like saying this totally inappropriate thing to my boss? Like, you should never say to your boss. That's probably why, because maybe something in your life, in the dynamics, relationships, whatever, is not sustainable, and there's nothing wrong with you for seeing it that way. But it is up to you to address it so that you don't go to the grocery store and like start a fight with somebody who took your parking spot that you were sitting there with your signal on waiting for. Because I mean, honestly, the one thing that I think is important when I point out all these transits to remember is that, unlike, your personal birth chart, which has your own personal placements and that has its own value, these are transits that everybody's living under right now. So like the pressure that you feel is like a commonly felt thing. Now, of course, depending on how good you are at like maintaining the mask or facade and drowning it out with distractions or mind numbing agents or whatever, then that's your prerogative. But if you are somebody who's trying to live life authentically and you just feel this like tugging, I would say your antenna is working just fine. Maybe there is nothing that needs to change, but for what it's worth, it is a common feeling to have right now, because there is, quite frankly, a lot in the world around us that is arguably like disappointing, that would leave you with a sense of disillusionment. And it doesn't mean you have to sit there and like stew in that. It just means that like sometimes growth and like sitting in your I don't know, taking control of your life and your personal power and like listening to your inner authority, sometimes that means like saying, wow, I always thought this was this way, but the older I've gotten, the more I realized that I was wrong about that, or that's not quite the way it was, or I was kind of looking at that with rose-colored glasses. There's nothing wrong with acknowledging, especially to yourself first and foremost, that maybe my view of this one thing was a little bit underdeveloped or narrow. And my experience as I've gotten older has given me a new sort of wisdom, a broader sense of the way things work. And, sometimes that just means looking at the way things work for people other than you and sort of seeing that what has benefited you doesn't work out the same way for others. And that doesn't mean there's anything wrong with you. And just because you acknowledge that the world is more complex than maybe you once thought, it's not like an indictment on you and your life. There's And so that's what I mean sometimes about like sitting in like the delicate balance of these like energies, because to everything there's like a light and a dark, right? Like a duality. And I think it's our job to not go step in and out of like the dark and light aspect of any archetype or energy. I think it's our job ultimately over time as we get older to sit in that delicate balance and to like hold the like be the wrangler of these energies. If you picture it like the devil and the angel on your shoulder, imagine every energy and archetype having a devil and an angel version. And that's like kind of a way you can visualize yourself being the wrangler. Like, don't let the devil sometimes be the master, and then the angel whisper in your ear this time. And it's like, oh, this time I'll let the angel like tell me what to do. This time I'll let the devil tell me what to do. And then calling that living in the balance. No, that's not it at all, actually. That's actually just being duplicitous in a lot of situations, right? It means you are the master of these two things, whispering in your ear simultaneously all the time. And it is your job to accept that your thoughts will take a dark, I don't know if dark's the right word. Sometimes, in other words, our ego that is very primitive, that exists within all of us, when seeing, when under these energies, and when we see an opportunity to win at someone else's expense, for example, or to be the person that zooms into the parking spot, even though you saw somebody sitting there with their signal on, but it's like, what are they going to do? Fight me because I'm in the big truck and like I'm big and they're small? Well, you're right. I guess you did win that situation, but did you really win the situation? I mean, it's like moments like that to where just because you know you can get away with something and you call it harmless because the other day I did something really good, I listened to the angel on my shoulder, that's a problem. And I'm going to go ahead and suggest that if you have a habit of approaching things that way, you're probably feeling a lot of discomfort lately. That's generally what these energies are boiling down to. It's that your discomfort, and how you want to deal with that is up to you. Are you going to double down in that line of behavior or that duplicity? Sort of like, today I'm listening to the angel voice. And then, if I do that enough times, I'll easily justify the next time the devil whispers in my ear. And I don't quite literally mean to suggest like the devil is talking to you and the angel is talking to you. You can look at it that way, whatever, but it's never acceptable to say that like, well, the reason I'm doing this is because the angel told me to. The reason I'm doing this is because the devil told me to. No, you're the captain. Remember, you just have to understand that every energy that you are influenced by, and often it's like the energies around you. A lot of us are very sensitive to surrounding energies and people. That's why group dynamics can be a huge win or a huge loss for a very impressionable person. It's never anybody else's responsibility to compel action one way or the other from you. You are always the captain. So just because you had like, the dark energy whispering in your ear really loud that day, if the dark one was capable of being there, the light one is capable of being there too. It's just always a matter of how good you have gotten at sort of squashing the good one down. And so, I mean, it's your job to sort of be the master of these competing energies, the duality, and be the person that, I guess, act in such a way to where you won't have to sit there and feel those tensions that suggest that your value system and what you would say in the abstract when describing yourself would be the things important to you and behaviors that you would attach to being a good person or an enlightened person or a wise person. Um, it's up to you to make your behavior every day line up with that. And it's often not clear cut. I mean, it's usually not clear cut. Sometimes you feel like in order to do the right thing in the grand scheme of things, you have to like be like sort of put your foot down with somebody and you don't like it, because like we all like to be liked. No one wants to be the villain in someone's day, but like if you see somebody standing in the way of like you acting in alignment and someone trying to like compel like the bad behavior out of you, sometimes you just be like, hey, listen, I'm not about that. I'm not with that. The answer is no. And that sucks a lot because, everyone wants to be like the kind of no worries person, the sort of, oh, no problem. Well, sometimes it is a problem. And if you are just masking for the sake of saving face, if you're like the no worries person and there are indeed worries, I'm going to tell you what happens. Some other poor fool or someone close to you who doesn't see it coming is going to pay the price for you letting something else slide with someone else, inevitably, right? So often, if you're someone that goes around with people, in more casual circumstances, like, oh, no worries, like Mr. Easygoing. Meanwhile, you're just like stewing underneath. Well, that's like just a time bomb. You're going to go home and literally take it out on everybody at home. I mean, you're going to take it out on your friends. You're going to take it out on your coworkers. That's just an age old thing. I mean, we all know what happens when you don't address things at that moment with that person. If somebody is like acting a certain type of way and you're in public, even if you think to yourself, wow, like, isn't it obvious why you shouldn't do that? Sometimes the best thing to do is either nothing, because you realize that what you're tempted to do is give someone like a sermon about like how that's not the right way to treat people and blah, blah, blah. But then the wise version of you is like, does this person come off as someone who's willing or open to receive like a grand life lesson? The answer is almost always no. So sometimes it's just like a sort of brushing it off and realize this is that category. This is within the category of things I can't control. And the person that, cut me off with their grocery cart in the middle of the aisle without paying attention and then looked at me with some type of way. That's just one of those things where you can just like shrug your shoulders and walk by because it's over just as quickly as it presented itself. One of my friends today was texting or sent a voice memo talking about like behavior similar to what I described, like sort of in the car, the school drop-off line. And for everyone that doesn't have kids, I have learned from my friends with kids, and for having to do this for a friend like a couple years ago for her kids in middle school, there is like there are rules to the school drop-off line. And when you're not familiar with the rules and you're just like a substitute driver, I remember feeling very like strongly that I needed to pay attention and get it right, watching what everyone was doing the first time, because there are rules. Like there's this lane and then there's this lane, and don't be the person that just zooms in and like cuts it. So my friend who was having a little difficult start to the morning earlier was texting like, basically some driver that was just like absolutely insanely violating all of these very obvious rules, like of the school drop off line, to the point where it's obviously a danger, like kind of cutting people off, and like obviously a danger to the kids getting out of the cars and stuff. And to where she was just like so baffled, and chose to do the smart thing, which is send her friends a voice memo sort of going, can you believe this? Like calling them chuckleheads, which is my favorite sort of derogatory term because it's just like patently funny. Using chuckleheads instead of some uglier word because their son's in the car, and just sort of laughing it off, and then like ending in the voice memo she said. So at the end of it all, I just was like in my head sort of instead of some obscenities that I wanted to yell, just like blessings to you and your family, because it's like you realize you're not going to teach that person anything. Like they're gone. It was all over pretty quickly. But, you feel sort of like when you see people have that kind of audacity that you're like, why would you endanger me? Why would you violate the rules that are here for everyone's, for the smooth sailing of the whole process that we all have to do every day? Sometimes, you see these people and they are clearly, they got their own problems. And so it's sometimes, especially at like 8 a.m. in the school drop-off line, you are thinking intelligent being, and you have the ability to rise above the very reactive inclinations that we all have. Like, the thing I really appreciate about my friend's voice memo is that was like straight up her being in touch with the shadow side. Like, it was her being like, this is what I'm going to choose to do with this interaction that really could have set the day on the wrong foot for me. And by sort of like presenting it to friends who would be sympathetic to the audacity that spoke for itself, it gave her the chance to like say it, release it, and to like create a laugh. And honestly, my takeaway was chuckleheads. That made me laugh. And I'm like, I'm going to file that one away. Anytime I think something really ugly, I'm just gonna use chuckleheads as my derogatory 4-letter word. So what I'm saying is the most danger that you can be to yourself and others is to be somebody who is the whole like Mr. or Miss I'm a good person type person. Like, find me somebody that reminds everyone out loud that they're a good person. I'm staying away from that person. That's all I gotta say. Because you shouldn't have to say that out loud. And also, actions have a way of sort of letting people know that one way or the other. And anytime somebody is extremely performative with good deeds or anything, I also get very like, seems very important for you to leave all of us with the impression that you're a good person, instead of just like doing good person things and then moving on from that interaction, and then the next interaction doing your best to do another good person thing. Or if nothing else, just avoid being like a bad person. A lot of interactions aren't about declaring you're a good or a bad person. In fact, most of them aren't. It's usually just sitting in a place of neutrality and not trying to just applying the golden rule. It's like smooth interactions with people and moving on, especially like in the day-to-day grind, and not and when you see the opportunity to do something helpful, it usually just presents itself, and then that's that, and then you move on. And I think that kind of circles back around to the sun and inner authority, right? So I've talked about in the Saturn video, Saturn karma, and I think bringing form to imagination over time. I talk about how when we're younger, the Saturnian figures in our lives are our parents generally, or school teachers, school administrators, like the people that generally compel like the code of behavior, as between you and other people. And then as we get older, we're expected to become our own Saturnian figure, right? And that would be a way of saying standing in your inner authority. And that stage in life happens at different times for everybody, I think. And I gave the example of sometimes it's when you go off to college, or even if you don't go off to college, and even if you live with your parents, it doesn't matter when you go out and get like a job, or like go out into any community where you're just amongst a group of people as an equal and expected to work alongside them. It's not up to your parents to tell you how to manage yourself and manage these like competing, like the angel voice and the devil voice whispering in your ear at any given time, because these are all new interactions. You're being placed in these new situations, and you're being asked on a case by case basis to, as worn as it sounds to say, do the right thing, do what you know is right. And it's funny because I say it sounds worn out and like kind of trite, but like maybe that's just because that will never get old. That is an evergreen rule, is like, do what you know is right, because the idea is that we all at a certain age know what that is. And often it's not the most gratifying thing. Often it's the thing that requires us to sort of put our ego to the side. Another word we associate with the sun. The sun is purpose and like confidence and asserting who you are in this world and making your mark on this world, which is, a degree of ego. I'm not saying, we need our ego. There's like healthy sort of iterations of expressing who you are, and they're more like problematic and disruptive ways. And again, it's all going to be a case by case thing. But when it comes to group dynamics and also like following a set of rules that have been imposed for everyone's general safety and well being, in a society with competing interests, in order for anyone's ability to maintain a sense of to pursue peace and happiness, there's like this code of rules, sometimes implied but often prescribed, like in writing, that we all have to follow. And it's generally not our first choice. Like if it's like me just feeding the ego and like my immediate needs, like, well, I don't really care if there's only this many. I would like this many. And so what if that means this many people have nothing? I mean, and sometimes, the hard thing is, what if you could have, more than your fair share and nobody's looking, right? Does it count if no one's looking? So the answer to that question, of course, is yes, it counts. And I'm going to bring Papa Saturn in and the transits to how I started the video about unmasking and sort of things deep below the surface, Scorpio, kind of being hard to mask and keep hidden. That is what the current energy is. I'm not going to make it complicated and go into the implications of Saturn and Neptune in Pisces right now. I could go into Venus being in Libra, which is the sign of ruler. It's a sign that's Venus rules Libra, and Libra is associated, with the scales of justice. It's a very, especially in regards to relationships and like dealings with other people, Venusian things. I could bring in Venus being in Libra and it approaching the South Node, which is a very karmic node. And the South Node is basically one of the nodes of the moon. The North Node is always opposite of the South Node. You could look this up online. It's in Vedic astrology, you call them Ketu and Rahu. Ketu is the South Node. If you want to Google these things and they interest you, Ketu is spelled Ketu. Rahu is Rahu, North Node, South Node. And I say these things because these are the energies are very, very, I think, instructive about the time we're living in. If it seems like everywhere you look, it's like, dang, like, I thought this person was cool. And as it turns out, like, did you see these allegations against them? And like, again, allegations aren't like what happened, but sometimes the allegations are like kind of echoing things that have been sort of bubbling beneath the surface that you had heard before, but like were easy enough to dismiss because they like, just like, well, that's unsubstantiated, or only that one source said that, and then it just sort of died away. I think you might find that this is like kind of a time of reckoning for a lot of those things that have been long hidden, right? And I'm not going to get into world events because we all know what's happening, and we all also know that like what is happening has been a thing that everyone, regardless of what their opinion of it is, could have told you that this has just been a matter of time, right? A lot of the things that you see happening right now belong together in the category of it was just a matter of time. And it's not because anyone willed something to happen or whatever. It is the natural cycle of the energies right now playing out. And why am I saying this? Well, because it can be easy to get really panicked right now. It can be really easy to see all of these things like, I thought this person was cool, and like now I see this, and like I thought things were under control over there, and it's not. It's all of these things like were just bubbling beneath the surface for a very long time. And I don't want people who again have no intention of like learning the depths of astrology. Like I get it, it's not for everybody. If you could just trust me and like think, why would she bother getting on YouTube and like spending her time saying this to people? It's because I truly believe that some people need to hear this. Yeah, there's a lot of moving parts in the world right now, and probably in your life. There's a lot of things that feel like that they're not the same, that they won't ever be, and that's correct. That is correct. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. And from that can create a not only fear, but like a sort of panic in people that really affects their not only their ability to enjoy life, but like nobody acts rationally from a place of fear. That's one thing I can tell you right now. And I personally, as a member of society, don't want to see a bunch of people who might be sensitive and they don't understand that they're sensitive people. They don't understand that, maybe their particular birth placements that they might not ever know about make them a highly sensitive, intuitive person. And they don't know how to deal with picking up on these collective emotions. And so they panic and they start acting erratically. And that, because we all come from different lifestyles, different backgrounds, we have our different traumas, we have our different unhealed parts. I mean, I think that explains a lot of what you see. It's like a lot of people acting from places of fear and it bringing about the worst in them, right? I mean, and just because we don't know how things are going to end up, like how all the parts that are still moving and it seems to like shift all the time, just because I don't know where things are going to settle down and like ultimately what the brave new world is going to look like. I'm just here to tell you that we all are capable of adapting in real time. Some people it takes a little longer and that's fine, but we're all capable of weathering it and like evolving probably faster than you realize you can. So it's tempting to just be like, well, nothing matters. It's like, I thought things were this way and now they're not. And like, who cares anyway? Well, I care. I'm going to keep on caring. And I'm going to need you to keep on caring. Most especially about how you choose to maneuver through what is a very an ever-changing world. Like things happen quickly and sometimes that's just the cycle of things and it's hard to accept and adapt living in that era. You just had an assumption depending on what age you are and how things were when you were coming of age to assume that like there was a certain degree of predictability in this area of life and that one and that. Well, there's nothing wrong with that. Like, there's nothing wrong with using how your parents' life went as sort of like your gauge for how your life might go. But like more people I know than not have already kind of disregarded that model, right? Like we've had, especially the last 10 years, we've seen like a lot change very quickly. And it can be hard to like, it can be hard to keep up and to keep like a level head at this rate of change and volatility. So, I'm with you guys too. Like I just, I try to do what I can to help people around me with the skills that I have. And then I let people show up for me and help me with the skills that they have because we all have something different to offer. And first and foremost, though, what we do have to offer is sort of like, yep, things are changing in the world, but like I'm here for you and you're here for me. And so all the external things that are moving and like shifting can keep moving and shifting, but like create the constants where you can. And that's in how you show up. And I'm here to tell you that the future is very much about building systems of interdependency with people. Codependency isn't going to cut it because at a certain point you are kind of boxing yourself in when you get caught in a codependency. And what you really want is to show up with all of your gifts and like your purpose, what your sun, your inner gold has to offer, because it is different for everybody. And if you are codependent on somebody else being there to distract you from really extracting what that is and cultivating it, you've already sort of sentenced yourself to not be a part of the interdependent future that we all are going to need to show up for. So, and I'm not saying you have to be single to do that. I'm not suggesting like, oh, if you're in a relationship, you're codependent. That's not what I'm saying at all. I'm just saying that sometimes it just depends on, everyone's relationship is different. But if your relationship, whether it's like with friends, like, or even codependency on like substances, or with your devices or means of entertainment or means of drowning out like sort of your sensitivity to the ever-changing world, those are all codependencies. So I'm saying you need to do whatever you can to make sure you're not that you're not putting most of your energy and efforts into kind of shielding yourself from these like external things, such that you are unable to evolve and adapt the way that you need to, and that you deserve to bring out the best in yourself, because it's there. I'm telling you, it's there. And maybe you've just gotten too comfortable with telling yourself that you don't have anything to offer. Well, I'm here to tell you that you're wrong. I don't know you, but you've got something to offer. And you could live in an apartment building and like sit there and you have kind of like a routine where you just are kind of surviving. You're just kind of getting through. And I get that. Like, but maybe just, even if it's like one little thing, like even if it's just like reaching out or like saying something to a neighbor that you regularly pass by, that you kind of like sense that they're lonely, or that you might have one little thing in common, or like you see like a plant outside their door and you've always thought it was neat. Like, oh, where did you get that plant? Like, just start saying things to people, benign things, like sort of harmless, like letting them know that like, hi, I observe you. I see that you exist and I see your plant and I really like it. And like, that can be it. And sometimes that carries people very far. Like sometimes you might think you're suffering, but like you have found it in you to like acknowledge somebody else that you pass by in some little way. And sometimes all that person needed was to be seen like by anybody in any capacity in that moment. And so that's what I mean when I say you do have something to offer, because I'm going to tell you right now, we can't have people just kind of like hiding away into their lonely boxes, and then just like showing up to what they're required to, and then just like shuffling away back into their box and like doing the same thing again the next day. We're going to have to start looking up and like looking at one another in the eye and like acknowledging one another. And I'm not saying like go out and start being like people's therapists. Like, I'm just saying like make eye contact with a stranger every now and then. And it doesn't mean you have to make up some reason to interact, but like we often observe things about people and then we don't share it with them. And often we observe like complimentary things about people and we just like let the moment pass where we could like just real casually acknowledge them in whatever way and then move on. And so I would just suggest that maybe the best way to use this Mars and Sun energy, which is confidence and action and depth, sort of trying to look at somebody and seeing beyond, and maybe kind of seeing something of yourself in somebody else, whether it's loneliness or like maybe a degree of fear and like sort of apprehension with the unknown, and like anxiety. Like you can pick up on these things with people, and if you feel you have it in you that day to sort of be that one voice of acknowledgement for somebody, I would just suggest that maybe just try that, because that is your power. Like that is your inner gold. And I need you to share it with people, because it needs to be shared. Because it has it's infectious. It will it will spark something in that person. And someone else might see you doing that you don't even know sees you doing that, and it infects that person. And it's like these little shows of confidence, like, and paired with action, paired with like sort of sensing something beneath the surface, Scorpio, and coupling that sun and Martian energy and like making some use of it instead of creating conflict and making the world harder for yourself and everyone else. So, you know, everyone's at their own place, baby steps. If you're not quite there yet and you're like, public, I don't know if I'm really up for like public interaction right now, that's fine. Um, there's always your vegetable prep. There's always the Martian activity of cutting up your vegetables for your delicious stew or soup or whatever. You just saute them and add them to some egg noodles or anything. You got to start somewhere, but or challenge yourself under this energy to just do something, put something into action that is new to you. You know, use the novelty of the world, like as it's presenting itself day by day. Instead of being jerked around by the changes, you start creating some changes. You set the paradigm, because otherwise the paradigm will be set for you and you'll feel like you're just along for the ride, when in fact you could actually just be a co-creator of the brave new world. So on that note, if anyone has anything to add, of course, like I always want you to comment, share. Of course, I want you to subscribe because I want more people. I want to feed the algorithm, as they say. I want more people who I think can benefit from this sort of alternative approach to like self-awareness and self-acceptance and just sort of like finding our fit in the world as it's changing all the time around us. I wouldn't be doing this if I didn't know for a fact that people I don't know could benefit from hearing these things and maybe participate, feeling like they're part of a community where other people sort of see things this way too, to where it's not just you that feels sort of like discombobulated. Like I know that there's nothing wrong with me, but like I can't quite get my bearings. No one is talking about these things. Why does no one talk about these things? Well, I'm trying to be the person that talks about these things. In fact, in like, you know, before I started this channel, any of my friends that are watching, they know like I was that person, whether you wanted to or not. I was going to talk about these things. And sometimes it's like, okay, we don't want to talk about these things. But either way, like, and that's always been my challenge, is like knowing when to sort of stop talking about these things, because this is always what I want to talk about. I want to talk about these things that we're all clearly walking around feeling and thinking, but that there's no common, we weren't socialized to talk about these things. We were socialized to sort of like deal with it and put on your best face, you know, for people, what you think they want to see. And oftentimes what you think they want to see is actually not quite correct either. So in the spirit of standing in my inner authority and authenticity, I'm going to keep on talking about these things. And I want you to join in, keep on joining the conversation. If there's something else that you want me to like focus on or talk about, or food that you want me to talk about, you know, if you need some sort of help in terms of like, if you're new to the cooking and food preparation world, if you want to see me do more kitchen stuff, like you want to see more sort of action, like cooking things, I'd be glad to do that. I've thought about including you guys in the actual process of making the stew, because I just am so familiar with it and it's so simple and it's extremely inexpensive for like the heartiness of the meal and the like size that it makes. You know, I'd be glad to start incorporating more of those kinds of videos if anyone's interested. So on that note, Mr. Jinx over here says that he's hungry. He's hungry for his dinner. Are you hungry? He's hungry for his dinner. I know, Bubby. Him a good boy. Him is a good boy. Okay. Well, you guys take care of yourselves. I hope you have a great weekend. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't, and let me know if any of the things I've mentioned as like possible new subjects to cover interest you. Let me know. Don't be shy. Until then, I'll check in with you maybe later this weekend. I don't know. Take care.